There's a loaf of bread in America that will not die. Someone shoves it in the back of a cupboard and forgets it. 2 weeks go by. 3. They find it sitting there at room temperature. Soft, pale, perfect. No mold, no smell, nothing. Bread is supposed to go bad, so why won't this? 3 answers, in order. 1. Exactly why that loaf won't rot. The real mechanism, not a scare story. 2. What got taken out of bread over the last 100 years and who took it? 3. What the words on that bag actually mean, because one of them is a confession. Look at your own loaf. Read the date. Odds are it's good for 2, maybe 3 weeks. Your great-grandmother's bread went stale and moldy in 3 days. Same word. Bread. Completely different object. And this isn't a conspiracy. It's a chain of decisions, each one reasonable on its own.
Which is exactly why nobody stopped it. For most of human history, bread wasn't a side dish. It was survival. Rome kept the peace by handing out grain. When bread ran short, people didn't complain. They rioted. Crowds in the French Revolution marched over the price of a loaf. Running out of bread could end a monarchy. The most fought-over food on earth. And today it's the one thing in your kitchen that mold won't touch. So what is bread, actually? Flour, water, salt, yeast. 4 things. The recipe humans used for thousands of years. And it has one defining trait. It spoils. Leave a real loaf out and mold finds it in 3 or 4 days. Not a defect, a deadline. People used to live by that deadline. Bread came to your door, a breadman, a route, a daily delivery, because everyone knew a loaf had about 3 good days in it. Bread had a clock, and everyone could hear it ticking. And one thing people mix up, stale and moldy aren't the same. Stale is physics, starch recrystallizing as the loaf ages, and that still happens. Mold is biology, something alive moving in. Modern bread still goes stale. What it does is hold the mold off, weeks instead of days. That gap is the whole story. The first machine arrives in the 1880s. For all of history, grain was crushed between stones, and stone ground flour kept everything: the starchy center, the fiber in the bran, and the germ. The germ matters here. It's the living seed of the wheat, where the oils and most of the nutrients sit. But the germ has a problem, for a businessman. Those oils go rancid. Flour with the germ in it spoils in weeks, and you cannot build a national business on a product that spoils. So the roller mill was built to fix exactly that. Steel rollers that strip the bran and germ away and keep only the white, starchy center. The result was flour that was nearly immortal on a shelf, and stripped of most of its nutrition. That was the trade. Nobody voted on it. White flour was cheaper, whiter, lasted longer, and looked like luxury. The nutrition was simply gone. Nobody noticed yet. They were about to. Now speed up. May 1921, Indianapolis. A company launches a loaf made from that white, over-milled, bleached flour with a name built for the century: Wonder Bread. Soft, uniform, snow white. It didn't taste like much. That was the point. It tasted like nothing objectionable, and it lasted. 7 years later, the second machine. Picture a jeweler named Otto Rohwedder. He sells 3 jewelry stores to fund one obsession: a machine that slices bread. People laugh. Bakers tell him sliced bread will just dry out and fall apart. Then in 1917, a fire burns his factory, his prototype, and his blueprints to the ground. He starts over. It takes him 16 years. And on July 7th, 1928, his own birthday, the first machine-sliced loaf goes on sale in Chillicothe, Missouri. Within 5 years, about 80% of American bread is pre-sliced. That's where the phrase comes from. The greatest thing since sliced bread. And it ran deeper than a phrase. In January 1943, in the middle of the war, the U.S. government banned sliced bread to save the steel in the blades and the wax in the wrapping. The backlash was so fierce that by March, it was over. America rationed gasoline, rubber, and sugar without a revolt. It would not give up pre-sliced bread. Now, here's where most people expect a villain. Stay with me, because the truth is stranger.
While America fell in love with soft white bread, a disease was tearing through the American South. They called it the 4 Ds: dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and death. Skin cracking apart in sunlight, minds unraveling. Between 1906 and 1940, roughly 3 million cases and about 100,000 deaths. Let me be precise because this part gets twisted online. This disease was not caused by white bread. It was pellagra, and it burned through communities where poverty had shrunk the diet down to a few cheap staples, largely corn-based, with almost nothing else. Bread wasn't the culprit, poverty was. For years, doctors were certain it was a germ, something you caught.
A government doctor named Joseph Goldberger was certain it wasn't, that it came from what people were missing at the table. Nobody believed him. So in 1916, he set out to prove a negative in the most extreme way imaginable. He called them filth parties. He injected himself with the blood of pellagra patients. He swallowed capsules made from their scabs. His own wife volunteered. They did everything conceivable to catch it on purpose. Nobody got sick. He'd proven it. Pellagra wasn't something you caught. It was something missing. Missing from the food. A single B vitamin, niacin. The exact kind of nutrient the roller mills had been stripping out of flour for 50 years. So the country did something genuinely good. In 1941, Roosevelt's National Nutrition Conference brought together the government, doctors, and the baking industry, and they agreed on a standard: enrich the flour. Put niacin, thiamine, riboflavin, and iron back in. It started voluntary. Within a year, most white bread was enriched. In 1943, a wartime order made it mandatory for flour crossing state lines. Deficiency diseases collapsed over that decade, helped by the enrichment and by a country climbing out of poverty. And this is the turn. Because it worked. It genuinely worked. This isn't a story about a poison anyone snuck into your food. It's stranger than that. The correction was so successful that it settled the argument forever. Once you can strip the wheat and then hand the missing vitamins back at the mill, the stripped loaf stops being a problem to solve. The fix didn't undo the refining. The fix is what made the refining permanent. And that's the confession hiding on your bread bag. The words enriched flour aren't a bonus. They're a receipt. They're the label quietly stating that something was taken out and a short list of it was put back. Not the germ, not the fiber, not the oils. The patch. Once a country learns it can top up its food at the factory, it doesn't stop. In 1998, folic acid joined that same enriched flour to prevent serious birth defects. It worked, too. Those defects fell by roughly half. Notice the pattern. The loaf had quietly become a delivery system, a way to hand a whole nation the nutrients its food no longer carried on its own. With nutrition handled, the industry chased the next number: time. Real bread needs hours to ferment. That long, slow rise is where flavor and structure come from. Hours are expensive. Hours are floor space and rent and waiting. In 1961, researchers in an English town called Chorleywood solved it. Instead of giving dough time, you give it force. Mix it at extreme speed, add 2 or 3 times the yeast, add fat, add oxidizers, and skip the long bulk fermentation entirely. Flour to finished loaf in about 3 hours. That logic, speed and additives standing in for time, spread through industrial baking worldwide. Picture the room where that happens now. Not a bakery, a plant. Steel troughs the size of bathtubs. Mixers spinning dough so hard the friction heats it. A river of identical loaves on belts, thousands an hour, no hand touching one of them. It smells like a bakery. Almost nothing else about it is the same. There's a second prize in all that speed. Intense mixing lets the dough take on a few % more water and hold on to more gas. More loaf from less flour, and it works with cheaper, weaker wheat. Bigger, softer, lighter, cheaper. Every incentive pointing the same direction.
But skip the fermentation and you need helpers. So the ingredient list grows. Dough conditioners, emulsifiers, oxidizers, compounds like azodicarbonamide, the same chemical used to make foam in yoga mats and shoe soles. It isn't there to feed you, it's there to make dough behave at speed. And that one has a story worth telling honestly. In 2014, a food blogger named Vani Hari pointed out that this yoga mat chemical was in Subway's bread. Her petition passed 50,000 signatures in a single day. Within days, Subway agreed to drop it. Scientists pushed back, hard, arguing she'd badly overstated the danger, and on the science, they had a point. The FDA permits it up to 45 parts per million and considers that use safe. Health Canada allows the same. But here's the part that stuck.
It took a viral petition for most people to learn it was in there at all. And investigators then found that same compound in nearly 500 foods, over 130 brands of bread. Which brings up the question people type in all caps. Isn't somebody supposed to be checking? They are, and that job was invented over exactly this. In 1902, a government chemist named Harvey Wiley recruited a dozen young men to eat measured doses of the preservatives creeping into American food: borax, formaldehyde, and worse. The newspapers called them the Poison Squad. Some got sick enough that trials had to stop. The outrage helped pass the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, the law whose enforcement arm grew into the FDA. So the agency people rage at online was born from this exact fear over a century ago.
Which makes the next fact land harder. Potassium bromate, a dough strengthener, is banned from bread in the European Union, the UK, and Canada. In the United States, it's federally legal within limits. Same loaf, legal on one continent, banned on another. In 2023, California became the first state to outlaw it, starting in 2027, regulators openly disagreeing with each other in real time. Which is the honest answer to, is it dangerous? The people whose entire job is to decide don't agree. And so far, we've only talked about what happens after the harvest. Go back further, out to the field, and one more thing changed that almost nobody thinks about: the wheat itself. In the 1960s, a plant breeder named Norman Borlaug crossed wheat into something new: short, stocky, with a stalk thick enough to hold a heavy head without toppling over under fertilizer. Far more grain per acre. It's spread across the world. It's credited with saving enormous numbers of people from famine, and it won him the Nobel Peace Prize. Not a villain, one of the most consequential humanitarians of the century. But it's worth knowing plainly, the wheat in your loaf isn't the tall, slender plant your great-grandparents grew. It's a deliberately bred, high-yield variety. Selective breeding. The same thing humans have done to crops for millennia, just faster and on purpose. The flour changed, the milling changed, the seed changed too. Nothing about that loaf stood still. And there's one more thing out in that field. Some farmers spray glyphosate, a weed killer, on wheat shortly before harvest to dry the crop evenly. Traces can carry through into the flour. Now this next part gets mangled constantly, so let's be exact.
In 2015, the World Health Organization's Cancer Agency classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic. That is a statement about evidence, not about your sandwich. That agency answers one question only: could this cause cancer under some circumstance at some dose? It deliberately does not ask how much exposure it would take. The EPA and Europe's Food Safety Authority asked that second question, the actual dose people get, and both concluded the residue levels in food aren't a cancer concern. So they're not contradicting each other as flatly as the headlines suggest. They're answering two different questions. And this isn't fringe. The company behind Roundup has faced over 100,000 lawsuits and paid more than $10 billion settling cancer claims. But be precise about who those cases are. People with heavy, direct, years-long exposure. Farmers, groundskeepers soaked in the stuff. Not someone eating toast. Those verdicts are about that kind of exposure. They are not a finding about the trace in your toast. And the agencies that did assess dietary exposure concluded those residue levels aren't a cancer concern. 2 different questions, 2 different answers.
There's one more thing in there, hiding in plain sight. Sugar. Soft American sandwich bread often carries far more sugar than you'd guess, enough that in 2020 it ended up in front of Ireland's Supreme Court. The question wasn't safety, it was tax. Ireland zero rates basic staple bread, and the law caps sugar at 2% of flour weight for something to qualify. Subway's recipe came in around 10%, 5 times the limit. So for the purposes of that tax law, the court ruled it didn't meet the definition of bread. To be fair and clear, that was a tax ruling, not a safety ruling. Nobody said it was dangerous, but sit with what it took to get there. A recipe drifted so far from the old definition of a loaf that a court had to say, on paper, that it no longer fit. So, back to the loaf in the cupboard that will not die.
After all that, here's the actual answer. It's not one villain. That's the whole trick. It's a stack. A preservative, usually calcium propionate, that mold can't grow through. Dough engineered so less of its water is actually available for a microbe to use. A sealed bag that keeps the outside world out. A plant clean enough that few spores land on it in the first place. Layer on layer, each one buying days. A plain loaf with none of that molds in 3 or 4 days. A modern loaf can sit for weeks. And notice what that means. Mold isn't judging your bread. It isn't refusing it. Mold is simply running into a preservative, a dry enough environment, and a sealed bag, and losing. That's it. It's not a verdict on the food. It's a wall. Which brings us to the label, and what it's honestly telling you. Not good or evil, function. Enriched flour means the grain was stripped and a short list of nutrients was added back. Calcium propionate means mold control, weeks instead of days. An emulsifier or dough conditioner means softness and speed. Sugar has its own line on the nutrition facts panel, and on a sandwich loaf, it's often higher than people expect. None of that is hidden. It's printed right there. It's just written in a language nobody taught us to read. And there's one loose thread left. I told you real bread has a 3-day clock. But there's a bread that's been outlasting that clock for millennia, without a single thing from a chemical supplier. You already know its name. Sourdough. Here's the beautiful part. In a long sourdough fermentation, the bacteria living in that starter throw off organic acids as they work. Acetic acid, propionic acid, propionic acid, the same family of compound as the calcium propionate in the industrial loaf. Sourdough makes its own preservative. It always did. It just needs one thing in exchange. Time. Hours of it. And time is precisely what the last 100 years took out. The roller mill took the germ to buy shelf life. Chorleywood took the fermentation to buy speed. And then, one by one, we bought back from a bag what the bread used to make for itself. The vitamins from the mill. The acid that stops mold from a supplier. The softness from a conditioner. Every single thing we removed, we've been re-adding ever since. Just faster and cheaper and without the waiting. So the next time you find that loaf that simply won't go bad, don't think of it as fresh. And don't think nature rejected it. Think about the trade. We wanted bread that was cheap, soft, endless, and instant. And we got it. Exactly as ordered. It isn't fresher than your great-grandmother's loaf. It's just running on a different clock. One we built for it because we weren't willing to wait for the old one. So go look at the bag on your counter. Find the date, find the word enriched. And tell me what your bread is running on, and whether anyone ever taught you how to read it.